can you just give us a quick sense here of what was discussed yesterday and what exactly Centene agreed to do?
Well, I think it was a very constructive meeting in my point of view, and I think my peers would say the same. We agreed to the co-payment, waiving those, particularly for the tests, which is very important. We talked about how to protect this population. We talked about the need for ensuring that there are masks for first providers, or first the initial people they see, to protect them so that they continue to do their job. We talked about those kinds of issues and what it takes. We talked about balanced billing, that it's inappropriate at this time for people to balance bill, and we need some regulations or legislation, whatever it takes to do that. They talked about those kinds of issues, what it takes to ensure that the recipients receive the highest quality.
Ed? Michael, Ed Hammond here. You obviously, were an early adopter of this whole idea of waiving the co-pays, but you've also, as you say, you're doing a bunch of other things. What is the economic impact of that going to be on the business?
It's really difficult to say. I believe that investors are going to have to expect some choppiness. This first quarter, we're going to have some increased costs relative to the waiving co-payments and things. But we also know that elective procedures have been deferred and delayed, so we'll see them in the second quarter. We're confident that our guidance is still within the range, but until this all unfolds, it's difficult. Just expect a little choppiness.
Well, let me ask it a slightly different way, Michael. You put out guidance last week. I think it was your first guidance since you consumed or consummated, I should say, the WellCare deal. Would that be different if you were putting out those numbers today?
No, I think we would still use the same numbers today based on the facts we have. But I just realized that as it unfolds, and it's still early, we expect there could be some choppiness. But as quickly as we recognize what it looks like, we'll let our investors know. We always have.
Michael, we know the president yesterday in his address said that co-pays for coronavirus testing would be waived, but he also said that treatment for coronavirus testing would be waived, the cost of that. And the White House later had to correct itself and say that that was not the case. But I wonder, that raises an interesting question, which is, what were some of the other ideas that were bandied about at the table that we might see brought up as possibilities should the virus outbreak widen and become a bigger issue than it is now?
Well, we talked about, as I said, we talked about balanced billing, ensure that doesn't happen. I raised the fact that we shouldn't be dropping people from the rolls and make sure in our case, the population with redetermination, individuals stay on. It's not a time to create uncertainty in some people's minds with that. Those kinds of issues, the mask, I talked about the FQHCs and the need to encourage them to provide care and give them the tools they need. We're short of masks, and the vice president made the point that he's been working with suppliers to get 31 million masks a month or more. And we said, well, let's get them out there to the providers that need them, because the last thing we need is providers having to self-quarantine. So those are the kinds of things we talked about.
Michael, as a practical matter, as the CEO of a company that obviously is at the front line of this, how do you balance that social responsibility, if you like, on the one hand, to provide health care, and on the other hand, to run a profitable company?
Well, obviously, we maintain the highest quality is the least expensive. And at times like this, we're going to do what it takes to take the proper care of the recipients. We're dealing, in many cases, with the most vulnerable population in the country. And they're dependent on us. And we spend a lot of time in this company. I have a meeting again this afternoon. We're meeting every day to ensure we have continuity of manpower available to advise these people on health measures needed. Very important. The finances, I believe that they'll follow themselves, and I'm confident we have a very strong balance sheet. We're a $100+ billion company. We have the resources to do it, and over the course of the year, I'm confident it's going to balance out.
And you mentioned very briefly there the sort of frontline staff, the nurses and doctors who are obviously treating the patients. What do you know about how much they're getting in terms of support and in terms of the protective gear that they actually need to themselves stay healthy through this?
Yes, I think they need more, but clearly when we had the discussion in the Roosevelt room, and the president himself was present, that we discussed that, and they recognize the need for it, and they're working very hard to achieve it.
So, Michael, what's next then? I mean, we're at a stage now where a lot of folks are expecting to sort of see an increase in testing kits, an increase of the testing protocol here in the U.S. There's some concern here that then that could increase the burdens on our emergency rooms and our medical facilities. Is Are we sort of prepared, I guess, as a nation to sort of handle that influx if that does come?
Well, I think, I've always had confidence. We somehow have the basic capability to rise to the occasion, and that's part of this country's makeup. In this case, I think we have in place protocols, I know, in our own situation, where they first do a phone screening, then they do some other things to look for symptoms before you start doing the testing. But we're in an environment now where it is going to get worse. I'm convinced of that before it gets better. But I think we'll manage it. And we have to. And individuals, it's no longer, one of my medical people who have a lot of knowledge in this area said it's a 1 degree of separation. You never know when you're in a store or somewhere else,
well, Michael,
somebody has it.
On that point, you mentioned obviously that the president was himself at this meeting. It came out just before we went on air that he was with someone who has now been tested positive for coronavirus, a Brazilian government official that he shook hands with. Did you shake hands with the president?
I did, but I also gave him one of our hand sanitizers right afterwards.